we're connecting to the recording service. Okay, now we're recording. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Chris McBride. In 2010, Chris became the 6th Executive Director in Spinal Cord Injury BC's long history. With over 20 years experience as a spinal cord injury researcher, research center executive, volunteer, and now community service leader in the spinal cord injury sector, Chris brings a unique set of skills and experiences to his role at SCIBC. He also brings a passion for making a difference for people with spinal cord injury, their families, and those with related disabilities throughout BC. So, here's Chris.
Well, it's not that many, but like, often I usually give presentations to spinal cord injury, so I kind of like to sit down for those. And
just don't forget to move them out.
Yeah. Apparently, this means I have to move them out. All right. So thank you very much for inviting me to give some of my perspectives on this business at KT. As most pointed, I've been sort of involved in spinal cord injury research and services for quite a long time. When I first started, there was nothing really to do with KT out there, and all of a sudden we had to start putting KT in all of our grants, and we had no idea what that meant, other than we try to get some community group to help disseminate some information about the stuff we were doing. And I hope that it's progressed a little bit beyond that. But I still get a lot of those requests from researchers almost every week. And so I'll talk a little bit about that, why that doesn't really work so often for us. I guess I have to do it. Okay. All right. So this is just a little bit on my background. I did a PhD in neuroscience doing spinal cord injury related research. I'm a cellular neurobiologist by trade, but didn't enjoy the research all that much and had the opportunity to join the management team of ICORD, which is the center that's here. I was actually part of the team that built the building here, which was great, and sort of transitioned out of research and into management and loved it, and got to do a bunch of cool things like work with the Disability Health Research Network here in the province, and with the development of the Spinal Cord Injury Solutions Network, which eventually became the Rick Hansen Institute. And the best part about all those 3 jobs was, for me, was my connection with community groups, and I built a lot of partnerships because they were essential to really fully engaging in the research that we wanted to do. So when at some point I got the offer to become the Executive Director of Spinal Cord Injury BC, I was super excited and have been enjoying myself for the last 4 years there. That's me on the far right doing my dissections. I don't know, for some reason they use this picture from like the early 90s in their promotional materials for about 15 years. But, so I'm just going to take you through a little bit of what SCIBC is all about. We'll talk about some things that I think is important for people to know before engaging partners like SCIBC. We'll talk about some of what I would consider some of the keys to successful engagement, and then I'll give you a couple of examples of those things. So SCIBC, this is a knowledge translation meeting, and I'm going to advocate for people to minimize use of acronyms, but I'm going to use them because I can't help myself with 2 in particular. So SBI, I'm going to say that probably a lot. That's Spinal Cord Injury, and SCIBC is my organization. So what do? We exist to help people with spinal cord injuries adjust, adapt, and thrive after their injuries, also their families, and support networks. And you know, we do this as people deal with a new injury or as they struggle with the ongoing consequences of living and aging with a physical disability. We have 3 sort of main streams by which we deliver those services. We have peer services, which are members helping members, so people who have lived the experience of having a spinal cord injury and successfully adjusted and adapted in ways, and they can share those experiences with others. Our information services are both telephone-based. We have a toll-free info line service that people can call 5 days a week, and then we have a ton of online resources. One of our most successful and I think probably valued assets is our Spin magazine. We actually print it out and we mail it out to people. 4,000 copies go out every quarter, and we tell stories about human interest stories about people's spinal cord injury, but we share a lot of information about research, a lot of information about what other services are available out to people. It's really, from a knowledge translation perspective, it's actually probably our most effective tool. I have health practitioners tell me that they read it every quarter because they know that if they don't read it, their patients or clients are going to come in and they're going to ask them about what they read in the spin, and they want to know. So that's really a positive reinforcement for us to keep doing that kind of stuff. And that's a big part of our communications piece. We do a lot of online video stuff as well. We just started a new thing called Spinal Cord Injury BC TV that we'll run a couple times a month that tells us the latest about what's going on in community, what's going on in research, just things that are of interest to our membership. So that's sort of the technical, I guess that's more of the corporate stuff. But I always like this quote. It's from one of our members that I think really nicely explains what we do. And basically, we're the go-to place for information and support from people who really know what you're about or what you're going through and how to get you back into real living. And for us, I think that encapsulates really what we do. One of the things we do is we take people bungee jumping. That picture there. It's pretty crazy, pretty cool to see. We are a provincial organization, so there's 30 of us all together, spread throughout the province. We feel like we have a pretty good handle on spinal cord injury and spinal cord injury issues and the priorities for our membership. 17 of us actually have a spinal cord injury or related kind of disability. We have an office up in Prince George. We have an office at the GF Strong Rehab Center here in Vancouver, and then we share an office with the Disability Resource Center in Victoria. Everybody else around the province works out of their home. So I just mentioned our peer support program. I won't really go into detail here, but we do a lot of one-to-one peer matching. We do group sessions. We do webinar and education sessions, and then we have a new thing. It's a peer support specialist service that we do in conjunction with WorkSafe BC and spinal injured clients. So it's really all about sharing the peer experience. And I mentioned about our information services. We kind of brand this as our resource center, and there's lots of different ways. So lots of online services there that are highly utilized. Actually, I think we have 800 sources of information in our database about all things related to spinal cord injury and disability related services in the province. Partnerships are really important for us. We know that we can't achieve our mission alone, which is why we value our partnerships and developing partnerships so much. And so we have all sorts of formal partnerships. We have a lot of collaborations. And with all sorts of different sectors. So a lot of other community service groups that we work with, private sector partners, health authorities, research institutions. And it's, in particular, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the research stuff that we're engaged in. Specifically, the I-Court group here, we do a lot of actual research where we're participating and our members are participating, but we also do a lot of knowledge translation related activities, including the CIHR Café Scientifiques, which are really a lot of fun. And we get a good turnout for those, and then we get quite a lot of people who watch them later online. And those types of things have been really successful. We're developing more ideas that we can connect researchers with our membership to have a bidirectional or multi-directional exchange of information and priorities. We did a lot of work with McMaster University. I'm going to talk about an example of that later on. And we do stuff with lots of other universities and things too. The health authorities are obviously very important. We do quite a bit with Vancouver Coastal Health. Challenging as it is sometimes, they're a great partner, and they provide us office space at the GF Strong Rehab Center, which is incredibly invaluable to us. But we're also working a lot of information, revamping their patient manuals, for example. We're modernizing them. We're going to put them online. We're going to put them into language that people are more readily accepting of and more understandable for them and relevant to them. And so that's been a really exciting project that we hope to launch within the next few months. Okay, so this is the part about KT and engaging community partners like Spinal Cord Injury BC and some of the experiences we've had. And I'm going to make this a little bit interactive. I'll ask you some questions, because I'm also interested in your perspectives. I can tell you what my experiences be, but it's also helpful for me to understand what some of your experiences have been in dealing with organizations perhaps like mine. So we'll talk a little bit about what's the quid pro quo in this equation, which is really important to discuss. A lot of times that's not considered, and I think there has to be something in it for everybody in order for it to work. And then maybe with some of those barriers that agencies like mine experience and why sometimes we can't engage or we might be reluctant to. So the first part, which is that question about quid pro quo, I have a hard time saying that word. It's really about understanding motivations, I think. And so I'm going to ask you what you think might motivate a community service organization like Spinal Cord Injury BC to participate in knowledge translation and research activities. You want to take a stab at that? Yep.
It can help inform the research so that it hopefully is more relevant to their context and their needs.
So whose needs?
The audience of the nonprofit.
Right, for their membership. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's something. Okay. All right. That's always the challenge with the online presentation. So yeah. So making sure that the work is relevant to the membership of the organization that's being engaged. Any other motivations that might?
I guess it would improve services for the membership or possibility of future funding.
Yeah, exactly. So improve services and the opportunity for future funding. Those are hugely important. Absolutely. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Well, you hit up on some of the major ones for sure. So I think it's really important that people not forget that the not-for-profits are businesses. They just don't make a profit or much of one. And these days, most are working in a sort of a deficit sort of scenario. But there's often an assumption, and I know people come to me quite often that think that I'm going to do it for free because obviously it's for the greater good. And yeah, it might be, but I quite frankly can't afford to do it for free. So there's got to be something in it, and the benefit either has to be so great to our members that I can't resist doing it, or there is some direct benefit to my organization to engage. So so you mentioned some of the good ones, like better outcomes for our members and clients, that evidence that's going to support our business cases going forward, validation of our services, for example, that's hugely important. Puts us at a great competitive advantage when we're going after money. And that revenue itself, KT should consider building in compensation for the organization in some way. So sometimes it's a buyout of some of my time, it's some of my staff's time. It might help pay for some infrastructure. Those things are really valuable, incredibly valuable to organizations, I mean. And that piece about the future funding, obviously. All right, so what might be some things that would turn me off of wanting to engage in your KT activities?
It's all about push, not about your ideas.
Yeah, so pushing, from your perspective, pushing this idea or this notion. Yeah, okay. So can you elaborate a little bit on that? Like,
not developing that evidence together, meet your particular needs.
Right.
I did it on my own, and I think what we should have.
Yeah, so not developing the idea together, and I think that's really essential part. And you'll see me emphasizing that throughout. Yeah. Anybody else? Let's take a stab.
Or like maybe, so obviously defining it together, but not coming to you and being like, we've got all these ideas, go with it, but
right.
then really working to define what it is that you're doing.
So a lack of clarity about what you're bringing forward to me might make me just say, well, why would I bother taking the time to figure it out? Yes, that's actually really important. Clearly articulating what it is you're looking for is really essential, and how you do that is essential, and I'll talk a little bit about that later too. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that's really important. Lindsay asked me to do this presentation a couple weeks ago, which really violates one of my standards in terms of timing, which is always really important. But Lindsay, I've known Lindsay for a long time. We built a really good relationship. I trust Lindsay, and so when she asked me to do something, I know it's going to be something that's probably worthwhile. And so I was willing to listen to her. Grovel? No, you didn't grovel. But so that's really important. Taking the time to develop those relationships and the trust that comes from it is really essential, I think, to successful engagement for sure. Yeah. Any others that might? Yeah, so lack of understanding of the time commitment, and I think that the general constraints on all of us, well, not all of us, but certainly in terms of running my organization, we do have a lot of constraints, time and human resources and financial support and whatnot. So all those things need to be taken into consideration. Oh, I'm supposed to move on. All these things are should be taken into consideration because we may be able to do something, but it might not be as much as you're hoping it would be, or it has to just fit in somehow. That's really important. Yeah. Okay, so you've hit upon a lot of the important ones, I think. Just that a lot of people come to me again with that assumption that we'll want to do it because we think it should be really interesting. So I know researchers are kind of this is the common thing amongst them, is that they're really excited and they're really passionate about what they're doing, and they think that what they're doing is really important, and it probably is, usually is. But it might not be quite as interesting or relevant to my organization as they think it should be. They might think that my members should be far more interested in it than they actually are. And so I think those false assumptions can really quickly turn me off, and I'm just, not going to listen for very long. I never have a problem with arrogance particularly, but when arrogance and ignorance are put together, that's a real turnoff for me. And again, it comes back to those things where they're just not taking the time to understand what it is, and that we do, but also the priorities of our membership. You really need to understand that before engaging. Often the requested commitment to participate far exceeds the benefits maybe to our organization or to our membership, so we just can't afford to do that, basically. And the degree to which we're asked to participate can be often way too trivial, and sometimes that's okay if it's a really simple thing. We're going to tweet out some stuff about their project or their opportunity to participate or something, but if we're more interested in listening when we're asked to engage in a more meaningful way. And I'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, so before engaging community partners in KT activities, just some of those things that you need to know about the barriers in terms of the realities that we face. So I think you've touched upon a few of these barriers already, but do you want to just take a stab at what you think might be the barriers to participation? You guys are a really quiet KT bunch.
So you mean the barriers of the not-profit?
Yeah. So what are the constraints that we face that might prevent us from being able to engage in the way that you'd like us to engage? Yeah, staff time. Huge. Staff time is a huge problem. Yeah. Too many asks. Yeah. So actually, that's a good one. We do have to prioritize, and literally, I get asked because spinal cord injury is such a small community in terms of the number of members and people with spinal cord injury in BC, for example. But there's actually an enormous amount of research activity being done in the area, and so it's probably one of the most overtaxed study populations around, and everybody wants access to our membership because they need it to do their studies. So if we were, and so we have policies about it, and we do have to prioritize. That's totally true. Any other sort of pragmatic constraints that organizations like mine might face? Funding, yeah. Oh, that's an interesting. I didn't even think about that, but yeah. So, that's an excellent one. I'm really lucky to have a very good board, which is why I didn't even think about including it. But I have worked in situations where I've had a very challenging board, and that's actually really a good point. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone? Yeah, so it might be that the priorities aren't aligned with researchers, but it's also our priorities at that particular time might not align with the ask that's coming through at the time. So it's a really important one, really important one. And really what arises out of is that we're chronically under-resourced, both in terms of people, our infrastructure, and our time. But it's also, we also lack often the required expertise to conduct a KT project. So we may not have the right people to actually engage in whatever activity is being proposed. And sometimes that'll be countered, well, we can afford to pay for a certain amount of FTE to allow somebody to do this. You know, maybe you could hire somebody new into the role, and I've had a lot of conversations about that on some of the bigger projects. But it's not as easy for me just to hire another person, because hiring another person means another person to supervise. It means another person who we have to do all the HR and all the infrastructure work around. And we just often don't have the capacity to do it. So as much as we'd like to do it, it's actually really challenging to add that extra element to our work. We mentioned about the lack of alignment with our mission and the competing priorities. And that piece about trust, again, which is so very important. Really, if there's no relationship created and it comes to us with a really big ask, I'm not going to say yes. You know, we need to develop a relationship there. We need to develop that trust. Okay. So, yes.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
What is usually the first thing that people do to earn trust? How do they start out? Communication, you start with that, but
yeah.
Usually, I suppose, face-to-face meetings talking, but other than that.
Yeah, so the question is about how do people go about earning the trust? And it's a good question. I think there's lots of different ways to do it. Coming out to our events is a good idea. You know, but giving me a call or sending me an email and just inviting a dialogue about what it is you're doing. Say, I've got this project underway and I'm wondering if you'd be interested in it. Can I tell you a little bit more about it? And I meet with researchers all the time partly because I'm interested in research, so I like it. I like learning and stuff. So it's just a good way to open the door, kind of thing. Thoughts all, don't come at me hard with here's what I want you to do, and can I have access to your membership and blah blah. Just, you know, I want to be interested in tell you, I don't know if your members would be interested in this research. Can we chat about it sometime? So that's often an easy way to get in the door with me, anyways, and I think with other groups too. And I'll get into this part about language, which I think is really important, and I think that's going to be really critical. You know, I speak a few different research languages now because of my experience in the field for so long, but I think a lot of my colleagues in the field who don't have a research background, who maybe haven't spent so much time around the research, often are nervous or reluctant to engage with researchers because there's just this language barrier and they don't want to feel stupid, or they don't want to be committing to something that they don't understand, so just taking that time to figure out how to, you know, do that soft entry into them. I think that's really important. But trust is something. I mean, I think there's lots of ways to do it, and if you can show value and you can articulate it up front, that's important. But just don't push too hard. Well, these had little check marks, but you know what, that's fine. Just the next part is about keys to successful engagement. And I've kind of broken them up into these 4 pieces, which are timing, relevance, the lexicon language, and the value. And it's kind of, this is kind of repetitive because they're, I think it's fairly straightforward, but so I'm just going to ask this isn't really a rhetorical question. It might appear so, but so like when is the best time to engage a group like mine in the process? What's that? As early as possible, yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
I've always, I guess I throw that back at you a little
yeah.
bit, because I think sometimes like we do want to engage as early as possible, but we also want to have clearly defined goals and not be sort of asking. So I often wonder about what's the appropriate point between sort of engaging people so early that it can be a little fuzzy and hard to engage, and engaging them so late that they don't have any input.
Yeah, exactly. So I think probably the right answer is it depends. But I think what you said, Lindsay, is earlier is always better. I think you do, yes, you do have to have some clarity about what it is you're putting forward. But I'm going to, well, does anybody else have any, before I go too much further, anybody else have any thoughts on this piece?
Okay, I'll ask a question. I'll ask whether or not it's possible to engage at a very specific time in the process that's going to actually have some sort of outcome. So in other words, that would be associated with some sort of practical outcome that your organization can help to shape.
Okay, yeah.
And do you have examples?
Yes, I do, and I'm going to present those examples later. But I think that piece about outcome, which is a pretty big word, it can mean a lot of different things, I think, in this context. But I think the important element of that is that it's best to engage at a point in time where it's not too late to integrate our input. Oh, I'm getting to move the mouse. I'm really not used to that. I'll get it eventually. So the most frustrating part for me, and the part that you know, I'll often say no to, is if somebody comes to me with a complete plan, and I'll look at that plan and I'll say, well, this part's not really that relevant. Like, I think you should change the language, or I think you should think about doing this or that, because that's how it would actually work within my organization. If it's too late to have that conversation, or if it's too late to actually include in a meaningful way our feedback and input, then I think it's too late. And a lot of, so the most successful experiences I have are when people come during the grant development phase. So there's clearly an idea, there's some work started, putting the structure and the outline of the grant together, there's obviously the ideas there and everything, and it's kind of it can be just a check-in to say, Chris, is this relevant? Does this language make sense? Is this something that you guys think you could do? Those are really simple kind of questions, but it's the right time, because I can say yes or no, and I can maybe give some feedback on how it might become more feasible for us to engage, or more relevant to our membership through the process. Which is really a common thing, because they realize that, oh, we have to have a KT plan included in this grant, and we need a community group to be involved. And I'm not afraid to say no, because I'm not going to commit to something that I can't do, or that's not of value to, that's going to detract from me my organization delivering a mission. So, you know, I think there are probably a lot of groups out there that don't know that they can say no, and they feel obliged because they think it's really important and blah, blah, blah. But I think that does everybody a disservice. So again, at that planning, so when's the best time to engage? At that planning time, when input can be received and incorporated, I think is really important. The next question. What might make a project relevant to a nonprofit? So this is the question about relevance, keys to successful engagement, relevance. what might make a project relevant to a nonprofit? Yeah, meets the needs of the community and the strategic plans, yeah.
Do you have researchers coming to you to ask what are your priorities, your member needs, and building their research questions around that?
So the question is, do I have researchers coming to me asking what the community needs are and building research questions around it? The answer is yes, but very few. Many assume that what they're doing is a priority, and it probably is at somewhere, but is it the top priority? Where it fits on the priority list is probably less clear to them than it should be. But the successful engagement comes from the ones that take that time to figure out what those things, those priorities are and how they fit in, for sure. Part of this question is in terms of our membership and the membership that I serve, but the other part is also in terms of how I am running my organization and achieving its goals and missions. And so there's different ways that projects can be relevant to both of those things. Any thoughts what those might be?
We spoke earlier about whether it can help support a business case that you're receiving funding.
Absolutely, yeah. Supporting the business case, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Does it? Yeah. So does it fit with the skills, the expertise, the capacity that we have available? Absolutely important. Yeah. Well, you hit all the right ones anyway. So yeah, yeah, alignment with our vision and mission. And you know, it's surprising. It shouldn't be surprising. It's the same. It's actually the same during job interviews. Like, I'm always amazed that somebody can come into a job interview for, let's say, a communications position in my organization and have no idea what it is that we do. Like, clearly didn't even look at the website. It's the same thing for somebody coming from a research at KT project. If you don't know what it is that I do, why are you bothering to come to me? Like, you know, come prepared and understand that alignment. You can sell it to me probably if you do that. That part about enhancing the operational capacity. So through the increase in knowledge that we're going to gain through the project, through the expertise that we might arise from it, and the overall competence of my staff to deliver the services, I think are important reasons why the project be relevant to us. And obviously, important to us is the enhanced outcomes that the work might provide for our membership, or our clients, or participants, however you want to describe them. Okay, so how do you think we did? This might be redundant at this point, but how can that relevancy be determined or ensured with us? That's maybe a harder question, given we've kind of had the conversation already, but. And I honestly can't remember what my answers were.
I think you mentioned already, so it's like doing your homework first.
Yeah.
And then also listening.
Thanks. That's really important. Listening part's really important. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just too curious. But it is that taking the time to figure out what we do. It's that part about understanding what our priorities are, and it's that part about asking before the plan is fully developed again, because if there's no chance for us to influence in a way that makes more sense for the plan, then why are you bothering? It's not going to work. Okay, so the next part, there isn't a question about this one involved with this one. So the part about successful engagement, speaking the right language, and we touched upon this already. We all speak very different languages, and it's so often a barrier. And I'm always amazed by how challenging it is, and how much extra time it takes to do the work to get the language right. Because if you don't, it just creates confusion, it creates incorrect assumptions, and it often can actually jeopardize the project itself. So the language is a barrier, and you need to take the time to figure out how it is you should be communicating with the group. That thing about buzzwords and acronyms, obviously that's an easy one for all of us. But I think the next point about you really don't need to dumb things down. And I think that there's an assumption sometimes that researchers need to dumb stuff down in order for people to understand it. It's totally wrong. They just need to use the right language. People running not-for-profits like mine tend to be pretty smart, pretty resourceful people. They can understand stuff. They just need to have it presented in the right way with the right words, and then everything's just fine. And I include one example here, and it's based on a project that I'm going to talk about a little bit later too, but we're looking at the role of leadership and peer mentorship. And so how can we create better tools for peer mentors to use to have better outcomes for the people that they're interacting with? And there's a lot of language related to peer mentorship and various roles within that. And we knew, my group, there's a couple of us going into this meeting with a bunch of researchers and a couple other community providers. We knew that this was going to be a problem because even within our service delivery, I'm part of a national federation of provincial organizations. We're all independent, but so there's Spinal Injury Ontario and Alberta and all these programs. And we all deliver services in kind of the same way, but it's actually we all do very different things. And we all have different language for peer mentorship and their peer support services. And so we've actually, it took like half a year for us to figure out a common language for those roles that were involved in the peer support programming. And so we knew that there's probably a good chance that the researchers were going to have the same problem. And so we didn't allow the discussion about the planning for the research to go forward until we had nailed down this language about what is a peer mentor, what do we mean by peer mentorship, and so we had this list of definitions that we all had to agree upon. And had we not done that, we would have probably had to go back 6 months later and revise everything that we had done that day and subsequent, because there was completely different assumptions about what those words meant. And so the language is just so important, and you have to be so crystal clear and have everybody agree and understand and make sure that everybody knows the words that you're using mean the same thing to everybody involved. I was really lucky that I was working with a researcher who was willing to to do that, and that's part of the trust piece, that we knew that we could trust stopping the process because she knew if we were doing that it was important to us and that she had to listen. It's good. So the value proposition, get back to that. What are some of the key elements that you think that should be considered when putting forward a value proposition for engagement to an organization like mine? You basically answered most of the questions, but thinking about it a slightly different way. And I think it's just really important to think about it this way, specifically. Right, so the payoff for participation is valuable enough for us to engage in it, yeah. So we're gaining something that we didn't have, yeah. Yeah. Any specific stuff? Because remember, you have to go back and think of us as a business. And a for-profit business probably wouldn't do anything if they weren't going to make money. We're a little bit differently motivated. We like money just as much as for-profit businesses do, but there's some other stuff that we're also interested in. Yeah, so membership for us is free, but we're always thinking about what's the value for the members. Like that's what drives us. Like we're a very member-centric organization. Absolutely, yeah. Return on investment. Yeah, that's pretty broad though. So I don't know if there's any specificity you'd want to add to that.
Leveraging dollars.
Yeah, leveraging dollars is a huge thing. Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty big thing too. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Yeah.
Do your potential partners ever try to describe what the long-term impact is for your life?
So yeah, so long-term impact is something that we have to include in all of our funding applications as well. But it's probably less important to us in the sense that we know that we can never actually quantify or demonstrate the long-term impact. And luckily, our funders also know that, and increasingly know that. So they have a pretty good idea that what we do now in the short-term impact is going to lead to the medium and long-term impact. They have a high degree of confidence in that piece, but they also know that we don't have any ability to really measure that effectively. And so it's important for our rhetoric more so than evidence, I suppose. Yeah.
No, I think earlier you were mentioning sort of gaps and capacity or in sort of staff skills and that kind of thing. So if you're helping to fill some of those gaps and potentially doing the work that's benefits your organization as well, that kind of is a win-win.
Yeah, the win-win is really good for that kind of stuff, especially if it fits within the services that we're already delivering. So if the activity or the research, whatever, doesn't add a lot of extra burden onto what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, then it becomes really easy for us to engage in the process. So it's really important for us. Okay.
The more that you participate, you learn so much more about how to be part of a research team now. That you're actually, that is from the value stuff. Now you're actually a better engaged partner than you would have been trying to engage.
Oh yeah, so exactly. So we gained some expertise in working within that environment. Is that what you mean? Like in terms of the understanding research, how it works, and how we can be involved. Absolutely. And actually, when I was with the Disability Health Research Network, that's what we did. Like we want to have these grants that sort of, I don't know, not necessarily embedded, but created those opportunities for first engagement for community groups so that they could start to build that expertise as we went forward. That's really important, I think. Yeah. I think that the first point that I have here in terms of the value proposition is if you can't articulate it, you probably shouldn't bother engaging. And that's part about getting back to doing your homework and understanding the priorities and motivations and all that kind of stuff. But those things, all the things that you mentioned in terms of enhancing our outcomes and impact, short and long term for sure, things that further our mission, things that enhance our operational sustainability, and that's the word we all use these days in the not-for-profit word is sustainability, in the short and in the long term. And short term is maybe we get some revenue in for staff time offset, and in the long term it's the grants that we might be able to get as a result, or the funding cases that we might be able to put forward. And then that piece about the tangible benefits, and they have to be tangible to our members. We call them members. Others call them clients, or they call them sometimes they're participants. So all those people. Okay, so I sort of talk about some examples, and I'm going to start off with a bad example. And I still get really angry when I think about this one, and Falcon in the back will know why. But and I see these red boxes were actually X's, and there's one green box here next to relevance that was a check mark, because I wanted from the example, these are the 4 areas that to successful engagement, and this one pretty much failed on all 4. It had a little bit of relevance, but also not complete relevance. So it's the thing. Spinal cord injury, a manifesto for change, which sounded really awesome when it arrived in my inbox about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I was curious because I didn't know about it, which was kind of weird. And it came from a group at the Toronto Rehabilitation Institute that I know well from my previous life in the research world. And so I was a little bit skeptical because I knew the source. And I thought that a spinal cord injury manifesto for change, that sounds like really broad. It's something like my organization would be really interested in, right? Like, I want to know, like, what are they going to propose? So I thought, I opened it up and I was just gravely disappointed. And then I'd read it, and then I read it again, and then I read it again. And every time I read it, I got more and more angry and more annoyed. And really what it ended up being is a call for change in 3 sub-areas of health services related to spinal cord injury. And there's a number of secondary complications that people with spinal cord injury experience. And, you know, some of the big ones are neuropathic pain and bladder infection and bladder issues, incontinence, bowel issues, sexual health and sexual dysfunction. They also experience pressure sores is a big thing. Cardiovascular issues are a big thing. And bone health is a big thing. So there's a whole bunch of priorities. We know what the priorities are. There's research that tells us what the priorities are. Our members tell us every day what the priorities are. The people who put this manifesto together chose 3, which we probably wouldn't have chosen as the top priorities. So already it's kind of at a disadvantage. I'm not excited about it because now granted there are things that can change within the health system, and we want to see changes in the health system to those. But as a manifesto for change, that's pretty strong rhetoric, right? Like I want to see the right things in that. So the problems with this for me were that the timing was bad. I get this like 3.5 weeks before they're going to publicly launch it at this National Spinal Cord Injury Conference that I was at last week. And then they're coming to us now with this thing that's completely beautifully laid out, it's a beautiful document, but it's done. Like, what am I supposed to do with it? It's really too late for substantial changes to be made to the thing. So it's kind of insulting from that perspective. The relevance I just mentioned is it's sort of there, but it's not completely there. It's not something we would want to put in a manifesto. Like, we'd have way different priorities that would go into that. The language they used was very, now I don't know what the audience for this was. I don't think anybody actually knows what the audience for this document was, which is a problem in itself. But it was like almost completely Ontario-centric, and it was meant for a national audience. And so like there was nothing in there that I could take to any of my stakeholders that would I would feel comfortable even doing, because they would say, look at it and say, like, why are you giving this to me? It would be embarrassing for me to do that. So the language is wrong. The value was wrong because what's the value? It was actually a negative value for me, because we think that our services and what we provide, organizations are actually really effective agents for change in these 3 areas that they're presenting, and yet all they were asking us to do was disseminate the information. And to me, that was grossly insulting and diminished the importance of the roles that our organizations should be playing in the change that they're trying to advocate for. So it was a really kind of a massive fail on all those levels, and I'm still angry about it. And I wrote them an email, and I told them I'm not going to support it. And what they probably don't realize is that it's not just that I'm not going to support it. I'm going to go a little bit further than not supporting it. I'm going to actually, what I'm doing is actually fighting against it. So instead of, I mean, they came to me asking for my support, and what they're getting is sort of a lot of resistance. And it's just stupid. It didn't have to be. Like, they could have engaged us early on. We could have had a dialogue. We could have created a document that had a name, a title that just made sense, that we would all feel more comfortable with language that reflected a role for all of us in it. But instead, it's just this piece that's just aggravating not only me, but a lot of other people across the country. So that's a bad example. And I think Lindsay's asked if it's okay for them to take this out when they, because her organization's name is kind of on it somehow. And That's fine with me. You've seen it here. So now I'm going to do a couple of successful examples. And this one is this little red card here, which the people in the room can see, and it's on the slide here. It's a little wallet card that provides some medical alert information that a person with spinal cord injury can carry around with them. And there's a condition that some people with thoracic level 6 and above can experience in response to a number of different stimuli, whether it's pain or whether their bladder is too full or whether they're engaging in sexual activity. It's called autonomic dysreflexia, and it's really characterized by a very serious spike in blood pressure and can be fatal. It's a very dangerous consequence of spinal cord injury, and so most people don't know about it, including people with spinal cord injury, but unfortunately not a lot of health practitioners know about it either. So this little card can save somebody's life. And we, in partnership with Vancouver Coastal Health and a leading researcher who happens to be here at ICORD in the field, work together on this autonomic dysreflexia wallet card. And it's great because we were engaged, I mean, with a true partnership between all of us. We all contributed our unique expertise to the production of this little thing. The language is such that our members can understand it. A clinician can understand it. It's simple. It's relevant, and it's of huge value to all of us. And we're really we're kind of proud of it, but it's a really important thing that can save somebody's life. And we think that's a great example of how we can all work together on a KT project. The other one is I talked about that half day that we spent getting the language of peer mentorship right. There's this amazing researcher at McMaster University. She runs a thing called Spinal Cord Injury, SCI Action Canada, Spinal Cord Injury Action Canada. Kathleen Martin-Guinness is her name. She focuses a lot on physical activity for people with spinal cord injury. So she created some physical activity guidelines for people with spinal cord injury, first of its kind. She produced these great sort of info packages that we've helped disseminate with her. We do a lot of stuff with Kathleen because she's one of the few researchers that actually takes time to get to know our organizations. She knows exactly how we work. She knows exactly what the constraints are. So anytime she asks us to engage, she knows that she's got to try to find a way that we can maybe get a little bit of revenue through that interaction. We're never having to pay for anything. So if she puts something in our magazine, she pays for that. She pays for all the extras. She knows that we're not going to do anything for free, and she doesn't expect us to. There's a number of projects that we're working on with her together. The latest one was including me and Spinal Cord Injury BC in the development of a rather grand research project that went to the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. It's a partnership grant that we were successful in getting. It's for enhancing community participation amongst Canadians with disabilities. And we just were awarded $2.6 million over 7 years for the project, which of that kind is a pretty significant thing for the field. So we're super excited about it. But why I was interested in participating is because Kathleen came to me with this idea very early on and said, Chris, I want you to be involved in developing this project, and then we'll work out how we're going to actually run the project. So, I'm not just on there as a token community member, community partner, which is often what we are on grants because that's the technical thing, but I'm actually a co-investigator and community lead on the project. And to me, that was really significant because we kind of have an equal governance role in the project. And, I think the more, and that's not always feasible, and not everybody can do that. I mean, it doesn't make sense for a lot of projects or community groups to have that much involvement in a project, but sometimes it just makes sense. And for us, this was great because it relates exactly to what we're doing. when we run the projects, we're not going to be doing anything really different than the services we're already delivering. There's just going to be an extra little bit of layering of outcome measurement related to it, which we're just super excited about because in our field of especially in the peer support services, there's very little actual evidence to support the value of it. And so anything we can do to collect that information, we're just really excited about. So it works for us on a lot of different levels, and we're just super thrilled to be such an integrated part of this project right from the very beginning, helping to build it, build in the relevance right from the beginning. It's a perfect example for me of how researchers should be engaging a community group in the development of, and running execution of a project. So that's sort of it. I don't know, how do I do for timing? Is it okay? Good. Okay. All right.